So, what are some of your other influences? Like, if you, go back to being in school or whatever, like, what were the things that you read or saw or watched or whatever that were your big influences?
So my first novel is steampunk, but I'm a big fantasy, you know, like I love fantasy. I love dragons. Um, and so I definitely started off with Harry Potter. I think
Sure.
start off with Harry Potter, um, and Lord of the Rings. Again, I have a lot of older siblings, so I would watch whatever they will watch. So I'd be like 6 years old watching Lord of the Rings, which
Hmm.
I mean is awesome. Um,
Yeah.
and Series of Unfortunate Events I loved that series in primary school. Mysterious Benedict Society. Again, a lot of the same sort of um, narrator voice. I really love description
Hmm.
and just like a quirky narrator sounds like they're speaking to you. I really like that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Um, and then Percy Jackson, and I think Percy Jackson was a big influence on that first series I wrote in high school.
Yeah.
I started writing that when I was like 12. So I think I think I was basically trying to copy Percy Jackson just with a different concept, but the whole like vibe and style, which I loved reading, but I don't think is my writing style.
Yeah.
Reflecting back, I'm like, but I think when you're first starting out, especially when you're that young, you just sort of copy whatever you're obsessed with at the time a little bit. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I was a massive reader
Yeah.
all through school.
Um, I made me think. Have you heard of the Nicholas Flamel series?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yep,
it's a little bit of a not an underdog. It's like slightly under the radar.
yeah.
I don't know if I ever finished it. I read like the first four when they were coming out, and then it kind of fell off my radar. But I remember reading that. It's kind of the same thing where it's like a bunch of familiar things that you know about, but in a different context. And that one, I thought that was a great series.
It's just exciting. Like those things are like yeah, seeing those familiar concepts. It's I love those moments when you're like when something clicks and you realize what they're referencing. Like I love all those subtle little um
Hmm.
you know, subtle little links. And it's so exciting to read, I think, because you're just like, oh, they're talking about the like, you know, it's just it gets you kind of pumped. So I love that
Yeah.
feeling, and I want to translate that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, I always, so I'm 35, and so when I was growing up, when I was about 10, that was when like the Lord of the Rings movies came out, all the X-Men movies came out, uh, the Star Wars prequels, Pokemon started, like all of
Amazing.
that hit just within that like 3 or 4 years. So I was basically doomed from the beginning.
It's amazing.
So all of that stuff like really influenced me, and one of the things, Tolkien obviously is a big influence, and I just really appreciated like how thoughtful the storytelling is. Like, some people might say it's slow now, or there's too much of this or too much of that, but like everything was done with intention, and that was something that actually really stuck out to me. And then I would watch, so when the movies came out, they came out with they like each movie had like 12 hours of extras or something. So I would watch all like how they made the movies and stuff, and then just the attention to detail in that. So like for me, that was something that really impressed on me, of like intentional storytelling. Like everything in the story is very intentional, and so that's something that I really am trying to like. That's part of why it's taking me so long to write mine, is because I really want like I want the details to matter. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. And I think Tolkien is the king of that. In fact, like I mean, there's a reason people kind of call him the father of fantasy, is because
Mhm.
he is the king of I mean, world building in itself was creating a whole new world was quite new for the genre at the time. Like he sort of, we had other fantasies, but a lot of the time it was our main characters going to another world and then coming back, like Narnia, they go to Narnia and then they come back,
Yeah.
or even like Gulliver's Travels, they go and then they come back. Like it's that sort of
Mhm.
fantasy. It's like people from our world going out, but then having characters living and existing and having this whole world that makes sense and that is
Mhm.
actually, that actually works as a society was really new. I think he was one of the first, definitely one of the first people to do that. I did a whole assessment on it at uni, but I kind of can't remember anymore. But he was one of the first writers to do that, which, yeah, it's amazing. The detail is so impressive, and so it makes Middle Earth feel so real.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is, so you look at someone like Brandon Sanderson, and he's like cranking out novels, like just I can't even keep up with it all. And which is great, and he's writing great novel, like not to discount what he's doing, but then also to look at someone like Tolkien, who pretty much spent his whole life writing Lord of the Rings or things around the Lord of the Rings, and that's pretty much what he wrote. He wrote a couple. I think there's a few other little things here and there, but like he pretty much like he wrote The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, and three other books. Like that's his whole legacy. Yet here we are, like almost a what 80, 90 years later, everyone's still all about it. So I think that's definitely something I always think about, like, if you're feeling that pressure of, "I gotta get this done. I gotta publish it. I gotta," like, you do that a lot when you're younger too. Like, I remember being in my 20 or late teens and 20s being like, "Well, if I don't do it now,
Yeah.
I'll never do it," you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, when actually that's a good point. I've never thought about how because he has probably definitely one of the biggest legacies in terms of his impact on genre and just, I mean,
He
his
basically
books are
wrote
just
5
timeless.
books, you
Yeah,
know?
and exactly, yeah. And his books are just so like they're still the best fantasy books. I mean, I don't think that's that controversial or cool. Like Lord of the
I
Rings are
don't
the
think so.
best fantasy.
It
Yeah.
is to me, so you're good
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. No one's gonna come after me.
Yeah. No, everyone on this channel is very aware that I am a big Tolkien fan. So,
Fantastic.
yeah.